Why are you so angry?
Everything, okay? That good enough for you? Everything. Every single thing pisses me off! The teachers, the students, my friends, my parents. You treat me like I'm nothing more than scum. Even though you're scum too. What right do any of you jerks have to judge me?
You want people to notice you, to care. You want somebody to need you, to accept you for who you are. Above all, you want to be loved.
Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Geek News Movie Night, where we particularly we watch a movie, we analyze it, we give our thoughts on the positives, the negatives, and everything in between. I'm your host, Adam Mickelson, aka Drac. I hope everybody's having an awesome day or night when you're listening to this. And joining me also is my lovely wife, Andrea. Andrea, we now get to talk about the second movie that we watched in St. George almost 2 months ago. So, how do you feel about that? Man, our lives are busy.
Yeah, we've been busy.
So, but this one we have been looking forward to because when we had finished season 3 of Fruits Basket, this was coming. It had not come out yet. I think by the time we finished it, it was maybe out in limited release, but I don't think we got it here. And that is the Fruits Basket movie, which in turn is, you know, a lot of people, when they think anime movies, they think it's just like a giant recollection of the entire series. No, this one actually was a prequel to the events in Fruits Basket, as we actually follow Kyoko Honda and see how her life was before Tohru and up until her death. So that being said, like, what were your thoughts walking into this movie? Like, were you hoping to get like some legitimate answers or anything like that?
Well, I got some answers, so.
Okay. So you were excited walking into it.
Yeah.
Is what I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
So I was actually getting really excited for this because the teasing was that it was going to be going into Kyoko, as well as her husband, what's his name? Katsuya Honda, and be able to show them, and we could learn a little bit more about the Honda family before they met with the Sohmas. And it turns out that there was a lot of connections, I believe, to Kyoko and the Sohmas originally, because she basically had met Yuki, Kyo. I want to say she had met what's her name? The leader of the Jade Emperor of the whole thing. No, not Hatari. The one who had a weird relationship with Shigure. The abusive one.
Are you talking about
Akito. Thank you.
Okay,
so yeah, I think she met Akito.
I can't remember.
She met some other Zodiac members during that time. She just didn't know who they were. But one thing that I did find very interesting is that they start things off with kind of a half-hour recap of, I want to say, the last 3 episodes of the 3rd season, because it basically starts when, actually no, it has stuff in season 2 as well, where it basically
it just does a
Kyo
recap.
made the promise to Akito that if he after he graduated, he would go into the cat cell kind of thing. So it started there, but a lot of the stuff we got was like the last 3 episodes.
Well, yeah, didn't it just do a recap of Tohru and...
Yeah, it recapped Tohru and Kyo's confrontation, and then the reactions of that, but kind of left Akito out of it. It put Yuki in there, just because he was kind of part of a lot of it. We got to relive the confrontation between Kyo and Yuki, and then we got the final scene, which was the opening up of both Tohru and Kyo about how they really feel, and also realizing that the curse was broken. So we got all of that up until that point, and I want to say it was like a half hour into the movie, because this thing was not that long. It's 88 minutes, so it's a little over an hour, but not an hour, just under an hour and a half. And so after the first half hour, then we go into Kyoko. And it turns out, one of the other scenes that they show is when Kyoko and Kyo met for the first time. And how she said that she understood him a lot better than he thought she did. To which, of course, Kyo was Kyo about it. Like, no, you don't. And then we go right into Kyoko's life and the absolute kind of utter hell that it was. And it turns out that, she did actually have a lot in common with Kyo. Because she, like, I remember having this discussion with you about all the self-hatred that Kyo had. Turns out Kyoko wasn't too far off from that either.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, a lot of this movie kind of pissed me off, but it's not because it was bad. It's because, like, a lot of this is utterly relatable. Especially when you think about Kyoko trying to give advice to Kyo, and she knew a lot more about his situation than... I'm not saying she exactly knew, but she knew what he was feeling during that time. There was a lot of self-hatred there with her as well. And partially because her parents were... I'm torn here. I want to call the dad a scumbag, because I think the dad was a scumbag. Because all that he was worried about was family image over everything else. But correct me, I don't know if I want to call the mom a scumbag. Because initially we think that she's totally on board with everything the dad is saying, where their image is being ruined by their ruffian child, who is, like, going out and starting fights and not going to school, and they're worried about what the neighbors will say. But then you kind of get hintings later on that she doesn't agree with him, but she feels like the only right thing to do is to follow him.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, at that point, do we call the mom a scumbag? I don't know. It's a 50-50 kind of deal, because I do think that she could have done something about it and maybe gotten somewhere, but I do know, like, when this is supposed to be based, divorce in Japan was kind of unheard of and was not necessarily a good thing societally. And so maybe at that point, that's what kept her from doing it. Is it just would have added even more bad image onto everybody in the family? Yeah, it's a complicated freaking situation, and unfortunately, Kyoko is a teenager in the middle of all this. Like, put yourself in her shoes. Like, she's basically being told that she's nothing but utter scum by her teachers, by her parents, by everybody. And then she comes across Katsuya Honda, who immediately does not hate her. And immediately just tries to... I can't remember what exactly he did in that office room, because I don't want to say that he just, like, immediately grabbed her and hugged her and said, let it all out. Instead, he just kind of sat there and took the abuse that she was throwing at him. And then eventually, like, after she got it all out, she felt a lot better and kind of gets attached to Katsuya Honda. Now, excuse me. Turns out Katsuya is actually a student teacher at her school. And he's, kind of getting his college practicum done. And it turns out that they kind of form a bond there. Because from there on in, kind of like how I'm bad with names right now, the tiger. When she changes back, how she kind of follows Tohru around like a little duckling. Kisa.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing kind of happens where Kyoko is always trying to follow Mr. Honda around. And it's not like they have a good relationship at this point. It's kind of condescending in the fact that Kyoko's basically treating it like he's judging her all the time, and so he just kind of is a smartass about it. But in turn, they start to get a stronger bond out of it. We do actually learn something very interesting about Katsuya's family, which I was wondering if we were going to learn anything about the paternal grandfather, because he was such a nice guy, right? Turns out he wasn't always such a nice guy. He was a very reputable teacher at a school for many, many years. It's actually why Katsuya got into teaching. And it turns out he was very much like Kyoko's parents back then, in Katsuya's earlier years. And Katsuya just kind of ran with the punches overall, but he didn't let it affect him too much, other than he wished he could have been more free on the matter. And actually, I think he kind of pushes that towards Kyoko a little bit and says, don't worry about what other people are thinking about you, just be free. Am I wrong about that? It's actually been a while since we've watched this, so but I think that's what he was trying to do.
Well, I don't remember him being that like that back then.
I think he encouraged her freedom more than anything else. Like a lot of his condescension was more just like him encouraging her to think for herself and all of that. So it eventually ends, or their relationship kind of ends after he stops working at her school and he's done with the student teaching. He actually doesn't go into teaching. He actually doesn't like it as much as he thought he was going to. And I don't think they ever really explained what he got into after that. He got a job, but we know it's an office job, but that's about all we know. Right?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't, because he's not a teacher. He didn't go into that. And in fact, kind of going back to the grandpa, that's the interesting thing too, is that, so he was such a stern parent until Katsuya went into college. And Katsuya's dad basically saw what he did and actually didn't want to continue it. And so this is where Katsuya got it, like encouraging freedom, is that's what his dad did to him eventually. Said, go do what you want to do. Don't feel like you have to do what I did because of whatever societal restrictions. And so that was kind of refreshing, and so you got to see a little bit of the paternal grandfather that we all know for Tohru. So I like that, and ultimately a lot of this movie is the emotional roller coaster that Kyoko goes through during pivotal moments. So her high school years, when she decides to quit the gang and or quit being the Crimson Butterfly and go and actually go back to school and learn for herself. And part of that is because of her affection for Mr. Honda. So you go through all that, and then eventually Kyoko gets kicked out of her house because they get sick and tired of dealing with her non-drama, roughly. And that's around the time that Katsuya basically says, I want to get married to you. And that was weird because of the age divide between them, but I'm okay with it. Well, they were both consenting adults, right? Because I think the age of consent in Japan is like 16. So there you go. And then eventually we go through the roller coaster of now she's pregnant and how Katsuya loves being a dad. And that warmed my heart, is that he liked being a dad. And then eventually we go into a low again where Katsuya died. And we don't know. It was so the cause of death was a mysterious illness that he didn't, like, he thought he just had a cold. He was on a business trip, and I can't remember if he had like a heart attack or something like that, but he basically died in his sleep, I think is what they said.
Yeah, I think he just died from the illness, but I don't.
And around this time, because Kyoko is so grief-stricken, she isn't really taking care of Tohru. And it actually looked to a point where she was going into some serious neglect territory. And something tells me that Katsuya's dad helped out a lot with that time. So that's why Tohru has such a good relationship with him. Also, if people are asking why, like, if she ever met her maternal grandparents, turns out they cut her off very quickly after Katsuya died. Because they immediately assumed that she was going to be broke and that she was going to be begging them for money. And so they cut her off. Which sends Kyoko into a further emotional spiral, which she eventually does kick out of, but like it got to some serious neglect kind of territory, and also kind of explains why Tohru had that weird complex when it came around to her dad, where she thought, like, because of all the bad things that were being said by Katsuya's family, that like she was immediately bad because of who her mom and dad were. And so she didn't necessarily hate her dad. Well, no, she did hate her dad a little bit because he wasn't there. I think that's what she basically admitted to. But eventually Kyoko does kick out of it, and that's when the relationship that we all know happened, where they are basically living together, they're keeping each other company, and also one of the things that kicks her back into parenting gear is meeting Kyo and meeting Yuki, and basically just kind of being there for Tohru. And it goes all the way up to the moment of her death. And what's very interesting is we once again get that re-emphasis that she didn't hate Kyo. She just wanted him to keep his damn promise. So that's the best summary that I can give here. It goes over their lives, and it was a very humble life. It wasn't like they were super rich or anything. They were getting by. But so they would have been like probably upper or middle class to upper middle class family in Japan. So they were pretty well off until Katsuya passed away, and then things got tighter. But let's go over the positives of the film. What do you think this film did right?
It was just nice to see from that perspective, I guess.
Which perspective?
Just, because you always hear all the things and you wonder how much of it is true, and
So Kyoko's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I also like the fact that we got to meet Katsuya, and also that Katsuya wasn't what we thought he was. Like, when we first meet with Katsuya, you're kind of like going, "This is Toru's dad? He's kind of an asshole." And I found that refreshing to an extent, because he was a kind person. He just also was very carefree. And he very much, like, I remember when we watched this, I made a lot of comparisons to Shigure.
Yeah.
He really felt like that. So I liked meeting Katsuya, and what we got out of that, because it definitely wasn't what I expected. I don't know if I had an expectation, but it definitely threw me off. I also did like seeing Kyoko's perspective, like you were saying. But more importantly, I like the fact that she had a very similar story to Kyo. And that's why she could relate to him, and that's why she cared about him. Because, like, when we're going through season 3, the only comparison that we can see is we know that she has a reputation, but she has orange hair, and that's the only comparison. I like the fact that we went deeper in, and she had probably just as nasty a self-hatred as Kyo did. And so she could relate to him. She could empathize with him. She just didn't know the rest. Which, again, I agree with Tohru. She would not have hated him for it. In fact, I think she, aside from maybe her parents, I don't think she hated anybody. She just kind of wrote her parents off the second that they said, well, you can't ask for money. Which was just... Seriously, that dad needs a kick in the nuts. I mean, kick you in the nuts.
Yeah. At least she had...
And again, I don't know if I want to absolve the mom, because she could have stepped in at any given moment.
But she chose not to.
She chose not to, and she could have easily just, like, sent, like, mysterious envelopes of money to her, and we could have presumed that it was the mom helping out. That didn't happen. So it's one of those things where I still kind of want to call her a scumbag too, because she had a choice in this, and she still chose to go down the path the dad was. And that's annoying as hell to me. Other positives of this. I kind of like the way that Katsuya and Kyoko's relationship started. Is they had this weird opposites attract kind of thing going on, and it worked for them. Am I wrong?
No, it's...
Yeah. And I also want to say that the stuff we learned about Kyoko, or Katsuya's father was a breath of fresh air. Like, he also was a bit of a dipshit. And that's why he had such a good relationship with Kyoko. Is that, you know, he made mistakes too. And so he kind of helped her out and said, you know, I'm not going to judge. Because one of the problems that Kyoko has is that the world has been judging her for so long. And it was good to see that at least one person, aside from Katsuya, just looked at her and said, I'm not judging you. Because I know what my son saw in you. So I kind of like that. But I'm talking over you, like other positives.
No, I mean, that was nice to see that he still seemed to understand and, you know, kind of take her in when her parents pretty much threw her out.
Yeah, he didn't, like, take her in, like, into his home, but he definitely helped out.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we did see scenes where he would come and bring dinner to Tohru and all that. That's the weirdest part of this, is, like, Tohru was basically living on her own for a lot of that, and that's kind of frustrating, but it's also relatable. Like, to lose a spouse is something that'll probably just leave you grief-stricken. And she just couldn't function. She had just checked out from life.
And almost wanted to kill herself.
Well, yeah, she attempted, didn't she?
Yeah, she was trying to
and that's what kicked her parenting into gear.
Well, because didn't she hear a cry or hear someone call out for mom or something, and she thought it was...
Well, yeah, she's basically said, I want to go where Katsuya is, and I can't remember, did she try to jump off a bridge?
Yeah, or fall into the...
And that's right, and then a young kid was looking for their mom, and that's what kicked her into, holy crap, I have been living I have not been helping Tohru at all. And that's what kind of kicks her into being the parent that she became. You just kind of wished it wouldn't have taken so long for her, but the way that this movie kind of portrays it is that it might have been years. I doubt it. I think it might have been months.
It just seemed depressing to just watch that.
So I don't think Tohru was completely out on her ass kind of thing. I think Katsuya's dad stepped in quite a bit, but I don't think it was, like, the movie kind of gives you the perception it might have been years. I think it was months that it was happening, and it just felt like years because of her depression. Which I'm not getting on Kyoko. This is one of the things that I found very refreshing about this movie, is that her story is very relatable. Heaven forbid if I was to lose you, I would probably have that same reaction. And I don't know if I would have checked out to as much as she would have, but it definitely would have made me somewhat numb to the rest of the world. And yeah, I'm not speaking ill, and I don't want that to happen, but I can totally get why she was where she was. And so I don't necessarily fault her for it. I think she did the best with what she had. And yeah, that's all the positives I've got. Are there any others you want to add?
Mm-mm.
Is there anything that we think that this movie did wrong?
Not that I can think of.
I was actually kind of surprised with all of the connections to the Sohmas that she already had. She just didn't know the truth of things. But I'm kind of glad that things were where they were. I don't think I would have liked it if they hinted that maybe like Kyoko knew about the curse. I like the fact that she was oblivious to it. And she just looked at Kyo like, just another troubled kid and just wanted to help him. So I kind of like that concept. I've seen some people arguing that, man, it would have been great if Kyoko had known about the Sohma curse, because then she could have done what Tohru eventually did. And I think, don't touch that. Just let, because Kyoko was already dealing with so many other things, and because of that, she was the inspiration that Tohru took with her. So yeah, I was happy about that, and how they decided to ultimately handle it. I can't really think of, the only negatives I can think of is all of the douchebags that were in both Kyoko and Katsuya's family.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, Japanese society, but fuck that. Just fuck it. You immediately assume that Katsuya ended up with a harlot, and it literally sounded like nobody paid attention to their relationship other than Katsuya's dad. And so that made the funeral just that much more frustrating. I especially got pissed off when the call happened from her dad. Like, they openly made it clear they had not stayed in contact with her. And then all of a sudden they find out that, because they knew him, because he basically tried to ask for Kyoko's hand in marriage, but basically did it in the way of, throw the middle finger and going, I'm going to do it whether you like it or not. And the dad didn't care. But then out of the blue, he calls up and says, oh yeah, by the way, don't ask us for money. Yeah, I'd throw the middle finger at him too.
Yeah.
That's really the only negatives I have, is that some characters were absolute bastards.
Mm-hmm.
So out of 5, what would we give Fruits Basket the Prelude? I think it's a 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think it explained, I think it did the explanation better than even I thought they would do.
Mm-hmm.
Because it knew where to go and where not to go. So, like, where all of the Fruits Basket events are based around the curse and all of that stuff, this was, we are 2 people trying to get along in life, and all of the humble beginnings that could come from that, and that's all that it needed to be. And that's going to go ahead and do it for us for Fruits Basket the Prelude. Actually, I'm really happy that we did these. We did Mario and Fruits Basket Prelude first, because these were highly anticipated for both of us, and I knew that we would want to talk about them. And thank you guys so much for joining us, because we loved having that discussion. If you liked what you heard, you can feel free to leave a like and a comment, and you can hear my daughter already, because she's giving us a hard time. She doesn't like it when we record. You guys can like, comment, and subscribe. It really does go a long way to be able to help us out on YouTube, as well as on other podcasting platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts, as well as Player.fm and Spotify. I would love to be able to have the discussion. I know that so many of you reached out during our critique of Season 3, and I appreciate the discussions that you guys were bringing in there. And I honestly do think that some people that did get mad at some of our opinions was because we summarized the first 2 seasons, and we will probably have to go back and rectify that. Because, I mean, you guys are bringing up some good points, but there was a reason that we summarized them so that we could get to Season 3. So we'll probably just have to bounce back to that, and hopefully we didn't leave too much out here. Obviously, you guys can ask specific questions, and that'll go ahead and do it for us. So when we come back, the next movie that we actually watched in St. George was in reference to one of our first Geek News anime nights, which was Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And so we took on its corresponding movie, The Star of Milos. So you guys can look forward to The Star of Milos next, and we will see you guys next time for that. Until then, take care.